This is Mark Wildman of Wildman Athletica, and it is December 1st, 2022. Fresh haircut. We're going to continue to do our lives down in the storage room because it is super windy and cold outside in the barn, and signal doesn't seem to be great there. If people could let me know if my sound is okay, that would be fantastic. KD's already online. Peter Brook already online. Let me see if I can't get this. I'm trying to figure out a way to display questions bigger. Doesn't seem to be working. Let me try this. Sound is good. Excellent. Sounds great. Excellent. Let's see if I can get the comments to show up in another place so they're not always showing up in the same spot here. Not yet. Okay. Well, that didn't work. Oh well. KD will be asking some questions from Discord members as well today. Excellent. Good. Let's do a quick review real quick. What do we have coming up? We have coming up Thailand seminar. We have European seminar coming up. We have, what are they calling it? Human Fit, thrown by Maurizio, the guy who created HydroCore. Will be in Italy next year. Details will be more forthcoming for that. There will be a seminar at FlowShala in March. So let's think of the order here. It's Thailand, London, FlowShala in Bellingham, Washington, Italy, and hopefully we can get some more in. There was an offer for a location in Colorado. I'll have to investigate that further, and we'll see if we can't start getting a lot more seminars done. The main format for seminars that we're teaching right now is the staff club MACE seminar because nobody's really teaching that. And so we teach it in order where we work on staff drills so that people start to understand natural learning, the natural learning technique. And then we do MACE exercises and club exercises to point out to people that the basis of human movement and athleticism is all the same. So we're letting people experimentally determine their understanding of why stuff is important, and then we put it in the order of what we think is important. Pinned chat. Cool. Well, that's not nearly big enough. Can I make that chat bar bigger so I can actually read this thing? Hold on one second, guys. Let me see if I can't make this bigger and bigger and bigger until it's actually readable from farther away. No, it's not actually. It did not work. There. Okay. So it's mildly working. My new idea is mildly working. Excellent. I don't know. Maybe we'll just do it the old school way. It seemed to work better than this new school way I was trying. What else do we have coming up? Hopefully we're going to be able to do some seminars in Indianapolis next year as well. We're going to start running a heavy club only seminar. People have asked for a heavy club certification, so I've been sitting down and working on writing that. We can also organize a kettlebell certification or kettlebell workshops until we figure out how to do all the other paperwork for people who want to be trainers themselves, and so that we make sure people understand what's important, and we check everybody's technique so we make sure that they're passing on the correct information. That's something that we're going to be working on in the new year as well. Short intro today. Let's just get right into it. Peter Brook. I know I'm saying your name wrong. You keep telling me how to say it, and I always mess it up. Club question mark. You say pendulums are rotational power cleans with hip snap. Where in pendulum is the hip snap? For me, the started position feels more like kokutsu daichi, back stance. Yes. The hip snap is when the club gets heavy. So in the beginning, so think of kettlebell hip snap. Kettlebell clean is hip snap. So an outside clean is still hip snap. It's just hip snap with a different direction. When you change the implement, it doesn't change. It's still hip snap. Hip snap is still the driving force of the action. So when you think about this, think about in the order of, let's say, barbell, natural stance deadlift, right? Feet shoulder width apart, feet pointed straight ahead deadlift. That's also, and then you have the barbell exercises, which are things like dead cleans, hang cleans, clean to squats, power cleans. All of those things are explosive hip snap. The thing that kettlebell does is kettlebell takes hip snap from max load that you would do with barbell, and it puts it more into an endurance context. Granted, CrossFit does do endurance hip snap by making barbells lighter and having people repeat Olympic lifts for long periods of time. But they don't push it as far as kettlebells. Kettlebells push into the 10, 20, 30-minute range of hip snap, endurance hip snap. Hip snap that doesn't change because you changed the direction. It changed the spiral that you use in order to accomplish the hip snap. So we think barbell, go to hang clean and dead clean, then go to kettlebell swing, then go to kettlebell clean. Those are all hip snap. Then if you took a kettlebell and you went outside or inside, they would still be hip snap because they're still cleans. Now change the apparatus to a club. It is still hip snap. If it's not hip snap, I don't know what else it is. You're going from a deadlift position, rotated, standing up with speed, and stopping at the top. So the hip snap is in the middle. It just depends on how heavy the weight is. The reason I tend to teach club side hip snap first is because most people suck at hip snap. Most barbellers, if you're an Olympic lifter, then yeah, your straight up and down hip snap's amazing. And then kettlebellers push that hip snap harder, but most people are not great at rotation. So I tend not to teach hip snap with kettlebells or side hip snaps with kettlebells because the weight is heavy. A light kettlebell, let's say 16K for men, is 35 pounds. If people are not lining up their spine right, which they almost never are because it's not taught anywhere else, outside of clubs for the most part, didn't used to be, now it's in kettlebells a lot more. The club can be 15 pounds instead of 35. It's a huge difference. So your beginning club weight is vastly lower than your light kettlebell weight. So the consequence of messing up is not bad. We just had mace and club seminar where it was just mace and club seminar at FlowShala, and everybody who came in was doing pendulums wrong. Everybody in the room. And people had been training a lot. Side hip snap is something that's hard for people to understand if they didn't do a traditional Asian martial art, specifically Chinese martial arts. In Chinese martial arts, you have something called a empty stance, and that is the same setup as side hip snap and pendulum, but people don't practice that outside of the context of Asian martial arts. It's not like in MMA. It can be in HEMA, but it's super rare to see something like that in HEMA, especially to see it practiced in HEMA. I'm going to close this comment screen because it's just freaking me out now. So yeah, the hip snap is from the bottom to the top. It's the middle. It's between the bottom position and the catch. It's the hip snap is in the middle. It gets more pronounced as the weight gets heavier. People tend to start with a light weight because there's very little consequence for doing it wrong. Most people go down and they roll their spine, which is not what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to maintain their crown to coccyx alignment, rotate their hips, sit down and drive their hip back. And that's something that I have a hard time coaching online without being able to see people. So I run through all my series of cues and people interpret that however they want. And that's just what you work on. If you start with a lightweight and you run through the math on accident, usually about 90% of the people fix themselves after doing it with about 3 weights. When the weight gets heavier, rolling your spine starts to suck a lot more, and people will fight back, and they will pull back against the club, drive their shoulder down into the socket, and turn their body more, which is what we want them to do. So, Peter, did I ask that question? It does feel like the start end position of back stance, kokutsu dachi, and believe that's judo, right? Back judo. So step in, cross leg, could be underhook, could be overhook, could be elbow control, hip back thrusted in, and then goes into a throw. If I remember my Japanese terminology correct, could be totally off on that. But yeah, it does feel like that as well. But there is some role depending on your entrance in the judo in the spine. So the hip snaps in the side. You just get up to a 50-pound weight and it becomes more apparent. A lot of people, we're trying to get people to do that by starting them with a light weight and encouraging people to go through at least 3 weights, but really, 8 weights. The more weights that they do, the better the side hip snap gets. Peter Brook, Kokutsu Dachi is karate. Okay. Back stance. Okay, so empty stance. But now I understand what you mean. Thank you. So somebody did karate for years. So yes, these are called empty stances. Kokutsu Dachi. I don't remember my Japanese. I haven't spoken Japanese in 20 years. Yeah, it also looks like that entrance from judo into tons of the throws. Overarm, underhook, cross neck. They all do slightly different things to the spine, but the hip setup is pretty similar. Good. Pavel B. Flat feet question. How to engage the ball of the foot instead of the big toe? That's an open-ended question, Pavel B. Usually, so this is something you see a lot when people start training barefoot for the first time. Their toes do all kinds of crazy things. If they've been wearing like fashiony shoes, then their feet tend to be super compressed and pointed. The more pointed the shoe, the more their foot does not spread. So when we start training in the beginning, we start with swings, inside circles, outside circles, all this stuff. The main thing about pointing your foot straight ahead instead of turning out, when people turn out, their arch collapse and their ankles roll in. And that's bad because now the basis of all of your movement is not set on a strong foundation. We get people to point their feet straight ahead. If they need to, they will turn them in 5 degrees further than that. They will train their basics until their arches start to try to fire. But something you see in the beginning is a lot of times their toes will stick up because they're not used to using their toes when they're wearing shoes. And depending on the shape of the shoe, their toes could be in that slight overextension and crushed together. So when people start training barefoot, you'll start to see toes sticking up at weird times in the movement. And it's really just a question of time. Having them repeat the basics over and over and over again and go up in weight. Going up in weight is key. This is what separates me from other people, is I want people to start weight and I want them to go to a heavy weight, because the harder the weights drag on them, the harder they will have to push or pull back against the clubs or the kettlebells or the mace. And then their foot will eventually get those toes back on the ground and try to push with the toe. People's feet then spread back out. Their broad part of their foot spreads back out, and they learn to engage more and more and more. There are also a whole series of drills which you can do based on the yoga 4-corner balance drill. If you do something like a kicking martial art, it's probably not super necessary to do the yoga 4-corner balance drill. But standing on one leg, leg straight out to the front, leg to the side, leg out to the back, and a cross leg, and then sit down, right? Classic. I don't know, maybe it's a classic, or maybe it's just in every version of yoga I know, or I've seen. And then when people stand on one foot longer, eventually they have to learn to push down through their toe. A very advanced idea is to take your single arm clubbing and try to do it on one foot. This is how you know that people do not naturally turn out with their feet. If you take one foot off of the ground, as you do, In many martial arts, you pick up a leg to avoid sweeps or low leg attacks and you stand on one foot. People's body will orient with their front foot. I have only ever seen ballerinas turn out with a strong arch and stand on one leg and do something like a four corner balance drill. But that is a specific adaptation to their chosen sport, which is dance, which is a very specific style of dance, which is based on a very specific style of aesthetics that started in the 1600s and moved forward to today. Yeah, so over time, people will have to put their big toe on the ground, either through repeated lateral swinging in volume cycles, going up in weight and repeating the basics over and over and over again so that you have to push and pull against the heavy weight, or doing single leg balance drills. The Kung Fu equivalent of a four corner balance drill is single leg stance from long fist Kung Fu. And you'll see this all the time, one hand up, one hand down, picking up the leg. It's a defensive posture, picking up your lead leg to keep people from either kicking you in the shin or reaping your front leg, and balancing and then moving forward out of that. You can do club in that position. It just tends to be really hard for most people. Usually people need to go up through at least 3 weights with their single arm. So for men, that would be like 15, 20, 25. Then they would go back down to the 10 or the 15 to start repeating a lot of that training over again on the single leg. But now it's not doing much for your upper body anymore. You're not going to be building a bunch of muscle, but you will be building endurance single leg stance. And balance is, one of those basic human skills that everybody should be really good at that often isn't practiced, in the modern world. Let's go back up here. So to answer your question, Pavel, eventually we force people to engage with the big toe by trying to knock them off balance. Swinging weights on one foot, swinging weights on 2 feet, teeterboard exercises, four corner balance drills, single leg balance drills, moving from squats to single leg. Did I ever make any videos on that? I don't know if I did or not. I had a whole thing planned. I don't know if I ever did it, based on turning kettlebells and clubs into Shaolin basic footwork, not advanced footwork, basic footwork. Let me write that down. Shaolin basic footwork. Yeah, I got my notebook here so I actually can write things down. Yeah, I wrote a whole program about that years ago to help somebody who was working in the film industry, I think. It never really got done, and that project never went, but it's not a hard program to write. KD, heavy light question. Thank you guys for the excellent clarity on questions. That's very helpful. Can you please provide an example of how you do heavy light for your mill squat and your upcoming basis of strength program? Very simple. Heavy light. So there's kind of 2 major ways to do this, and it depends on what resources you have available to you at the time. Heavy light can either mean a heavier weight and a lighter weight, or it can mean a higher level of complexity and a lower level of complexity. So for level 1, you would go level 1, level 1, level 1, level 2. That now becomes your heavy. Then level 1, that becomes your light. Level 2, heavy. Level 1, light. Level 2, heavy. Level 1, light. That should run you out of level 1s. Then it should become level 3, level 2, level 3, level 2, level 3, level 2. And it rocks back and forth. And then if you rock all the way through one weight, and then level 3 will become the light, and then you'll go back and start level 1 with a heavy club. And it just rocks back and forth. So you're always a different level with a different weight. So the level 1s become heavy when you're second time through, and level 3 becomes light. There are much more complicated ways to do it, but that is the most basic way. I've made a bunch of videos on this in Nerd Math, and I laid it out on the chalkboard, and usually you start level 1, level 1, level 1. That gets people into it, allows people to get good at level 1, but they also, by the end of 3, because there's 4 learning opportunities in each round, people are like, I've seen this 12 times. I'm getting really good at it. They're not getting good at it, but they think they're getting good at it. So then you put in level two. And then level two becomes new information, and that becomes harder for them to focus on. Then the next time you go back to level one, which they've already seen 3 workouts times 4 rounds is 12. Now they get 13 through 16 learning opportunities, and they get even better at it because they've seen a higher level of complexity and it seems easier to them. The other heavy light way you can do is much more complicated, and it starts. Usually, you have to get through a bunch of your first weight first, and then you would go back and you would start. I'll have to lay this out on a chalkboard. It's much more complicated. But basically, the idea is that you set up your checklist. So you have your checklist where you have level one, weight 2, weight 3, weight 4, and it goes down. There's 6 fields, and you just go through. When you get into something like the Basis of Strength program, which has so many levels, people oftentimes don't run that whole program in the pure way. They will start after they get through, like say level 4, where they do 2 weights. They'll go back and they'll start with level 1 with the 3rd weight, and then it'll become level 5, level 1, level 3, and it rocks back and forth between super heavy, medium heavy, and light. So heavy, medium, light. And then if I was like training an actor or something, we would do it based on day. There would be 3 options for what they could do, sometimes 4 options, because if they just wanted to do something entirely new, you could go to level 6 and start that one. And then you would start rocking in and filling in kind of like a crossword puzzle, all your level 1s down, all your level 2s down, and you would always get that inverted triangle where you would end up doing a lot more level 1s and slightly less level 2s, slightly less level 3s, slightly less level 4s as you get up towards level 7. The goal is always to get people to do more of the base levels than the high levels, because people need to get better at the basics in order to be better at the more advanced stuff. So I made some videos on this where it's an inverted triangle, and then that triangle then progresses across. The Basis of Strength program, everybody knows what's going to be in there. People who saw the beta of the app that never went saw tons of this stuff. All this stuff was already laid out and lined up, but the app never did the math that I wanted it to do. It didn't take data, it didn't track data, it didn't graph data, and then it didn't do the if-then statements of the heavy lights that I wanted it to do. So we have another app company and we're working on that, but next year, maybe. It's a lot of stuff. Everybody says that they can write this app and that it's going to be easy, and then they don't, because I'm trying to make a 10-year app. And with all the different programs, how many programs do we have out right now? Swing, clean and press, Turkish Get Up Master, which has 5 levels, right? You could really consider that 5 programs. So, and in clean and press, there were 5 paths based on weight. In swings, there were 4 paths, 4 time zone paths. That already right there is 4 plus 5 is 9 plus 5 is 14 plus, what did we have? We have Bodyweight. There's 2 Bodyweight programs out. There's Mill Squat. There's the 7 levels. It's a lot. It's a lot of training shoved into a very small period of time. Slam ball. And then I want the app to be big enough that eventually it can hold all the programs that I have on paper and in my head that it's going to take us at least 3 years to get through. Each one of my programs could be an app in itself. And that's something that might have to eventually happen, to make a family of apps that interact with each other and share data, but run separately, because with the complexity of what I keep trying to get people to do, which all works on paper, it's harder for people to make it all work seamlessly here. We're just going to have to keep working on it. So heavy light, usually start with 3, go to heavy, go to light. And then once you get to the end, flip in a heavier weight and you start alternating again. KD, mace question. Beginner mace training for 360s. Should we start with volume cycles up to 20 sets of 5? Yes, of course. And is that an EMOM? Depends. I had a client who was 78 and it was an EMOM. If you're 30, it's probably not an EMOM. It's probably straight through. It's probably learning to endure. I'm training a 70-year-old person, and it's straight through. It's not an EMOM. It depends on the weights you have. Usually people need to start with light weights. I tell people that all the time. I don't think anybody listens to me. People always buy the weight that they think that they should get in their head. And then you have to determine whether it's an EMOM or not an EMOM based on how much you're actually killing yourself. So, because when I train people, I can look at them, and I have now the 8X adjustable mace. I can make it so light that it doesn't have to be an EMOM. That is the point of the adjustable maces and the adjustable clubs, is to take out a lot of the fancy stuff that you have to do to trick people into doing what you want them to do if they only have a limited amount of equipment. So there's always a perfect path, and the perfect path is based on perfect equipment. The other training tricks are based on limited equipment and people's unwillingness to listen to recommended weights. So if people went out and they just bought a 20-pound mace, because a lot of, big, strong athlete guys don't think that they need to buy the 10, even though it's only like 40 pounds or something to get a fixed weight 10, then it becomes an EMOM, because if it's not an EMOM, then their muscles tend to be stronger than their joints, and their movement tends not to work very well. So they end up having a really hard part of the movement where there's a big jolt on their body because it's not fluid yet, because they didn't allow themselves the learning opportunities of the 10 and the 15 to get to the 20. Then it becomes an EMOM. So the question is always, the answer to everything is always yes. It's both, based on what people have and based on what they don't have. That's always the answer to the question. So the math always changes based on whether or not people have the recommended equipment or not. Most people don't, right? Most people get what they can and they start. So a lot of times it will be an EMOM. I'll look at somebody and say, it's an EMOM for you. Done. And then the path changes. But the starting point is always different. Good questions, guys. When is the app going to be out? Robbie Malu. I wanted it to be out by Christmas time. It's not going to happen. I got a new app guy 6 months ago. He told me Christmas time, no problem. I said, I want you to do this. He said, no problem. I said, do you understand what I am saying? He said, yes. I said, here's a kettlebell. I want you to do these programs so I know you understand what I'm saying. And so he has all the programs, and I want him to go through it so that he understands the actual data points and everything else that are supposed to happen. When's it going to come out? When they actually understand what the hell it's supposed to do. People say they understand me a lot, like all the time. And very rarely do they understand me. The last app company said they understood everything I said. Nothing was a question. They could do it all in no time at all. And they didn't deliver literally anything. So I am skeptical. But I've paid a lot of money for it. So we're going to get something if I have to drag it out of them by the fingernails. I don't know. Darth Cello. Currently Tetrising 5 programs, awesome, on a heavy light cycle 6 days a week. Badass. The heavy light within the week feels great, but sometimes the volume of any given day becomes quite difficult to manage. Yeah, that's the point of changing programs all the time and running heavy light cycles, is that there's never, because you're changing movement patterns by changing programs, you get tired, but you learn, you're adapting to different things. So this is my version of muscle confusion training, which was that thing that they always used to talk about in like P90X and everything. They do different stuff every day. The problem with that program is that, just from what I saw of it, is that there didn't seem to be any major themes. It was exercise to exercise, which many programs are, instead, or exercising to make your body look good, like it's arms, it's core, it's whatever. But instead of all of my programs are less about body parts as they are about movements. A swing is a movement. A clean and press is a movement. A get up is a movement. A body weight get up is a movement. A Krav get up is a movement. So the philosophical difference is we are doing muscle confusion when you Tetris a bunch of random programs together like that. And it does become difficult because sometimes you'll get a high day and a high day stacking on top of each other, and there's just nothing you can do about it. But it is random chaos inside of an overriding idea and program that will move everybody forward. Yes, it gets hard. Training is hard. Training is hard every day. Some days it gets easier. Yesterday was doing a double kettlebell workout because I have these awesome adjustable double kettlebells. And I started over very light weights, and I'm working on writing a big double program kettlebell idea. I'm trying to write a perfect one, but it's like 2 years long. But it's like double, what was it? It was bent over alternating rows, 15, and then 15 on each side, followed by half snatch, followed by seesaw press, followed by front squat. And it was like 15, 10, 5, 5, 5. And I did 8 sets of that. Light weights, double 18s, because I want to see where the hard parts are inside of it. And there's a whole giant idea that I'm trying to work out how to make survivable. But it's hard. It's hard. That was a hard workout. Today I did basis of strength and I used a 50, and it was hard. It's a hard workout. Training doesn't get easy, it just gets more manageable for the most part. Some days are easy, some days are not easy, and that's the heavy light cycle back and forth. The training doesn't get easy. I don't know how to put it any other way, right? I was talking to a client once and we were working on a movie, and he looked at me and he said, "I don't want to train. It's so hard." And I looked at him and said, "Yeah, it's hard every day." He's like, "Is training easy for you?" And I said, "Absolutely not. It's not easy for me. It's hard every day. You have to wake up and figure it out and make yourself do it." I make it doable by writing exact plans that I know I can carry out. I know exactly how long they're going to last. There's nothing random in them, so that you know how much you have to get through so you can mentally prepare. But do they get easy? No, they should not get easy. That's not the point of training. The point of training is to take something difficult and do it every day in your life, and then learn how to manage that difficulty. It's a mental training thing that I stole from Kung Fu, not a new idea. That you wake up and you train and you cause your body to learn to endure, and then over time that helps you do other things better. You do physical, and then that helps you mentally be better, and then that mental leads to spiritual. It's the exact same idea in yoga, right? Yoke the body to yoke the mind to yoke the spirit, so that you can, live life better. It doesn't get easier. I don't know how to tell people that any other way. It's not really supposed to. It gets more doable and more fun, and you can put in more fun sections. I had a whole fun section before the hard part I did today, where I did 30 minutes where I'm writing another program based on foot movement, because everybody says I don't do enough foot movement in my basics training, because I don't do enough foot movement in my basics training because people can't move their feet. They need to learn to stand up first. So I'm working on writing a foot movement idea in a logical way based on a series of traditional movement patterns. But that was the fun part, because that's all exploration. But the hard part is pick up the big weight, do the long workout, get it done, and then do your stretching, and then go through life. KD, swing question. Excellent labeling. Why start and stop swing isn't the default version of swing program given it teaches better technique. It's labeled as the higher complexity version. Same question applies to start, stop, clean. Easy. When you start, stop, you put the weight down. If you let people put a weight down, they never learn. So, first things first, learn to not put the weight down and stand up. So, by learning to not put the weight down, you will have to get better at enduring. When people do start, stop movement patterns, start, stop swings, or start, stop cleans, they will often stop for a long time. If you let people do it in the beginning, they don't understand the breathing, they don't understand the mechanics, and they will stop for 5 seconds. They will stop, they will compromise their entire structure. So, step 1, learn to not put the weight down, learn to stand all the way up. Step 2, work on that start-stop position after you have already learned how to endure by dropping the numbers back down, and then get better at that other thing. Simple idea. If you let people put the weight down, then they will put the weight down. They will never become endurant. The idea that we're trying to get with basic swings, basic clean and press, and all this other stuff is we want people to learn to not put the weight down and stand all the way up and learn to breathe. The swing program and the clean and press program are not long times under tension. The swing program maxes out at what, a minute time under tension in the high levels. And the clean and press program maxes out in what, 3.5 minutes at the high levels with the high levels of complexity. But we're trying, that's not a long time. Like a long time is 15 minutes without putting the weight down on the ground. But we have to build the basics in small chunks. So people have small time under tension, they add volume, they learn to endure the unification of structure, breathing, and movement, so that then eventually we can get people into the higher level programs better, faster, if that makes sense. People have to learn structure and lineup before they can learn endurance, because structure is part of endurance. Am I saying this right? I think I'm saying this right. Hey, Black Scout Survival stopped by. Thanks, Black Scout Survival. Saw your live the other day. It's fantastic. Loved everything you said. Yeah, so the reason that we don't do start stop in the beginning is because we want people to learn to stand all the way up and learn to suck it up. It's, once again, that's the mental training. We make it one small step harder every time because we are yoking the body to yoke the mind, to yoke the spirit. We don't talk a lot about spirit or mind on this channel because everybody else talks about that. We talk a lot about figuring out how to yoke the body. And that doesn't mean just being hardcore, right? Just being hardcore is for the top 10% of athletes who probably had a lot of training in their youth. We're trying to teach the bottom 90% of the population, everybody who's not an elite level athlete, how to do that by teaching them how to breathe, how to move one step at a time. Because if we teach anything one step at a time, everybody can learn it. The goal I'm trying to do is 10% of the population, right? Think like the On It guys, like MMA dudes, right? They're way up there. They're 1% of 1%. And they've already gone through 12 years to get to the point where they're doing what they're doing. Most of them. Some of them probably less, right? But the ones who are less line up better. There's natural athletes. There are natural athletes. I've met some of them. They're terrifying. But nobody else is talking about the bottom 90%. Nobody else is making that their goal. Everybody else wants their training to be super sexy and super cool, and they want to get the coolest people to do it. And, you know, they get the badass backgrounds and they really tan and they oil up and everything like that. And I don't think that that is a great message for everybody. That's a great message because sex sells, but I'm trying not to do that. I'm trying to make it understandable and logical for everybody else, that bottom 90% of the population. I don't know if I'm saying this right. I'm probably saying it wrong. I say a lot of stuff wrong. I'll come back to it. I get better every week. Back up here, Darth Cello again. Should I adjust one program to focus on the other? Any tips on surviving days when reaching the peak of multiple cycles on the same day? Yeah, adjust it. So normally, if you don't start all your programs at the same time, so all the programs have different times to reach their peak. If people would come into my studio, then I would know when to roll in another program. So I usually start with one program and I start running, let them get through 3, and then a heavy light, and I let them get through that. And then I start doing intro to kettlebell stuff or something, where I start to prepare people to do a program with learning technique, and then I'll fold in another program. But if all of your programs are going to hit high in the same week, don't do that. Have 1 or 2 of the programs hit high in the same week and start another phase of the other program and come back and do the high of that one later. The goal is to not have all of them peak at the same time. It's very, very hard on people. And when people peak all at the same time, it's just hard on people. People are more likely to get injured. So everybody has to get smarter and figure out how to not have their stuff all peak at the same time. That is the point of the Tetris of training idea, is that it should almost be impossible for them to all peak at the same time. If you started like Bodyweight 101 and then 3 months later you got Krav 1, Bodyweight 1 should have peaked and Krav 1 should have folded right in. The path for clean and press is different than the number of workouts to get to the peak of swings. They should naturally miss each other. They were designed to miss each other. So if they're all hitting at the same time, I would love to know when you started everything. That could happen. I mean, anything can happen. I have had people do that in the studio before, where they started to peak all at the same time, and you're like, whoa, 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 and you'll put one program aside and you'll start a whole nother program that week to start a variation from the peak. So one day will be super hard and the next day will be all new information that's super easy because it can't be hard yet. And then you'll get through the peak of one thing, it'll go back down to reset to a lower reps. You'll go back, finish the peak of one thing, and then keep doing the learning technique of the other program. That's the whole point of all of the program ideas. They're all meant to do something specific, to teach you something, and to drop in and drop out of training as needed. That's the point of the giant checklist. Once you get through the giant checklist, then you're done with that program, but you're kind of never done with the program because you can always find heavier weights. Has anybody gotten slam ball up to 100 pounds yet? I did. And I found out that 110 pound slam balls are super duper expensive. So I just dumped slam ball for now. I haven't done slam ball in a while. But you can always roll it back in later. You don't forget this stuff after the number of learning opportunities you've had. You get rusty. Do you forget it entirely? It should be really hard to forget these things entirely. Maul. Love the name Maul. Don't know how to get on the Discord. I keep searching for it, but nothing. There's a link under the videos in the description. So normally it says link to Discord. Grant Gardner is in charge of that. Grant will tell us. Somebody will tell us on the Discord if that link isn't working or something. Can somebody check on that? That would be great. I just sound like the boss from Office Space. That would be great. Base question from Peter Baruch. I'd love to hear your thoughts on mace starting weight. Kettlebell for men, you used to say 16K, but clubs 15 pounds. What about maces? Mace, longer handle, normally 10 pounds for men. Healthy, fit men. Everybody keeps saying that that's not true for everybody, and of course nothing is true for everybody. I had somebody get on and tell me that Turkish get-ups weren't for everybody because they were dangerous in the comment section a couple of days ago, and I was just like, I don't understand that. Normally starting weights for men are 16K for kettlebells, but not always. What if they have contraindicators? What if they ripped their shoulder out? What if they had an ACL surgery, right? 15 pound for club, 2-hand and single hand. Usually because single hand is a volume cycle and 2-hand is time under tension. And then for mace, it's usually 10 pounds. It doesn't have to be. It could be 15, right? But I don't know that unless I look at an athlete. Usually for ladies, I have starting weights at 8K, at 10K for two hand, and it used to be 10K for single hand, but now that we have adjustable clubs, I make it 7.5 because it's just easier to teach people the lightweight, let them run a cycle, and then go up to 10 because it takes away a lot of the training stuff that I have to come up with. And 7 pounds for mace. I usually err on the side of light for people because movement is hard. Granted, if you were Team Great Britain or something, then that's probably different. I'm talking about normal people, 90% of the population. I'm not talking about the top 10% of the population. Top 10%, who was that CrossFit champ? CrossFit, she was like top 14 or something. And she was training. She was beast monster. And she walked over and picked up my 35-pound club like it was nothing. Granted, she's world-class CrossFitter, so that recommendation changes. I was training next to this guy I know in LA. Once again, amazing CrossFitter, right? 15-pound club was brutal to him. Brutal because of the rotation and the joint movement. So I have recommended that are kind of general, but it can float up and down. If you have injuries, it might be lower than that. But always err on the side of lighter, start adding complexity, see if you rip a joint out of the socket or anything, and then move up in weight. I always say, weights are cheap, surgery is expensive. Ego will beat you to death. Ego will beat you to death, and it will get you killed. So starting light and running the math is a way better idea if you want to stay alive a long time. It took me a long time to learn that, but I learned it very, very well after many, many, many injuries, that it's just easier to start light, do a learning cycle, and then go up in weight. Stephen Blackshaw, question: is there a slight rotation of the shoulder and hips as well as weight transfer between feet during shield cast? Absolutely. 100%. 100%. It is not just a robot shoulder exercise with a heavy weight. You can do a robot shoulder exercise with a light weight. Usually how people do it in the beginning is they don't know which way to move their hips. It is towards the loaded hand. If I have a weight in my right hand, my left hip will move towards the right, my weight will shift, and I will pull back to center. Absolutely. Your weight should shift, your shoulder should shift, your hip should shift. With a light weight, doesn't matter. Go up through 8 weights. Single arm of 50. It's going to shift 100%. If it doesn't, then that's not your heavy weight. Then you can that. If you don't shift your hips, then that would mean probably that you have a 100-pound two-handed shield cast. There are heavy clubs like that out there. I just don't own any of them. I need to get heavier ones. I called ADEX to see what's going on with steel right now. So the monster kits, because of steel and transportation shutdowns and everything in the last 2 years, what were they calling them? The kits that go up to 80 pounds. They weren't in production because you simply could not get that chunk of steel. So I called yesterday about that and said, what's going on is, last year the port of LA was closed and steel was not coming in, and this is all kinds of crazy stuff, but we would like to get people up to that. But think, in order to not move your hips, you would really probably be at 50% of your max weight or lower. Good questions, guys. Excellent. Where were we at here? Maul, Peter Baduch, Steve Blackshaw. Question: do kettlebells and clubs sufficiently work the hip flexors, or are additional exercises needed? I mean, that depends. What do you want to do? If you want to be Jean-Claude Van Damme, then no, they do not sufficiently work your hip flexors or quads. Kettlebells and clubs are generally general physical preparedness, right? General physical preparedness is what you should do the most of. It builds your foundation to do like sport specific preparedness and then activity specific preparedness. And then that all leads to your mental emotional preparedness. Most people who are training just need general physical preparedness for the most part. And then I encourage people to either do martial arts, activity and sport and activity specific preparedness, or like, dance, something that's infinitely complex. I myself loved aerial. So I used to have general physical preparedness, which was kettlebells and clubs. It could also be barbell. It's your body weight training as well. Could be push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, all that other stuff. And then you have your sport specific preparedness in aerial. That's rope climbing and inverting. And then that instantly turns into, because you're doing aerial, activity specific preparedness, because your inverted climb is the preparedness to do a star drop. So they all lead together. But then the more sports you do, the more sport specific preparedness you have. So then if you're going to do judo, then take your general physical preparedness, and you also have to do your rolling series, half kneeling, same side lead, shoulder, alternate legs, drag across, standing same side shoulder rolls, turning into jumping break falls. That's your sport specific preparedness. And then your activity specific preparedness is each individual movement pattern in jiu-jitsu. A lot of times in the modern world, because classes are limited to an hour, you'll see some of those things get dropped out in the interest of time and trying to make people good at something. So a lot of people will go join a martial art but not have the general physical preparedness to survive it effectively, or their general physical preparedness has nothing to do. So general physical preparedness has grades. I consider kettlebells and clubs to be the best general physical preparedness because they move the body in the most directions for endurance. If you're doing, say, deadlifting, is that the best possible training, prep training as your general physical preparedness for aerial? Probably not. But it's certainly better than nothing. Is running the best general physical preparedness for aerial? No, not even close. So a lot of people do things as general physical preparedness that might not be general physical preparedness. They might actually be a sport, like running. You can always, there's so much gray area in here, and it's philosophical in how you think about this. But yeah, I lost the question here. Let me go back. Let me read this question again. Where'd it go? Boy, we're getting a lot of questions here. Hold up on the questions for a minute, guys. You guys are pushing me way off my list here. Where'd it go? I lost this question now. Crap. Something about kettlebells and clubs. Sufficient to work the hip flexors. Okay, so this was related to Steve Blackshaw's question. Do kettlebells and clubs sufficiently work the hip flexors, or additional exercises needed? They work properly if you just need to be a normal person. If your sport requires a lot of hip flexor movement, ballet, aerial, tricking, then you'll need additional exercises. And that's true of every sport, every sport. If you just did kettlebells and clubs, it would be perfect prep for something like horseback riding. It would be perfect prep for something like dirt biking. It would be perfect prep for something like mountain biking or endurance road biking. Something that doesn't require a lot of hip flexor complexity. But if you're doing something super complex, then you're going to have to get into activity or sport specific preparedness. So that is a broad question. So the answer is broad. KD, core question. Man, KD's just hammering out these questions from the Discord. I found a low weight two-hand club mace hammer swings have made me able to connect to my lower abs that I forgot existed. Okay. Anything else you can recommend to reconnect to the lower abs? Yeah. V-sit, boat pose, L-sit, rope climb, parallel L-sit, flutter kick, invert straddle climb. V up opposite arm, opposite leg raise, V up opposite arm, opposite leg raise, rotation twist. Yeah, tons. Hammer swing. So for everybody who's not familiar, a hammer swing is, think of an inside circle or an outside circle where your arms remain straight the entire time and you swing big. I tend not to teach it that much because oftentimes in the beginning, people will bend their knees, they'll arch their back really hard at the top, and it requires a big space. Like, you're not going to do it inside of an apartment for the most part, unless you're very short. Definitely not going to work for me. So for me, I need, I think, 10, 11 foot ceiling to even make a hammer swing work. So I don't talk about hammer swings all that much. They used to be talked about in club swinging a lot more because they used to be part of the trial by fire for club instructors. You had to do mills, swipes, and hammer swings. I just don't care about swipes because kettlebells do all of those planes of movement better. I would much rather do a shield cast front swing, right, which is a circular front swipe. And I don't really care about hammer swings because I'd rather do reverse mills. Hammer swings used to get talked about a lot, but because of the space limitations, they're not something you can train a lot of places. They're not something you can train a lot of places. And the odds that somebody's going to mess up the rotation across the top by not keeping both elbows locked out is high. It's high. I used to just do them one-handed when I had to do my test because it was really easy to do it that way. I would put the other hand and just touch the club instead of actually keeping the double grip conformation. I cheated because I was using like 50-pound clubs, and so doing it with 15s, it was really easy to make the time limit if you just gamed the system. But I gamed the system because a lot of people can't train it. Like, you have to be able to train that outside. If you try to do that in a gym, they're probably going to throw you out. But you can get away with mills and reverse mills inside other people's training facilities without them panicking because the club never passes, more than maybe that far above your head. And mill, inside, inside, outside mill, outside, outside throwing patterns, I think, are just better off. So yeah, hammer swings. Keep losing my place here. So yeah, so hammer swings make the circle bigger so there's more force from a lighter weight on the circle. So because think of it as the difference between a snatch and a clean. A snatch is harder to hold on to with a kettlebell because the kettlebell falls farther. Therefore, it's picked up more speed. Therefore, the grip at the bottom is more intense, which is why snatches are so hard. The same thing is true for hammer swings. Because the circle went from midline to the bottom half of the circle and it became a full giant circle, people tend to get more core engagement for lightweight, but it also tends to sometimes go wrong. That was a fun question. That was a fun question. I'm getting off on a lot of tangents today about these things and the interconnectivity of how these things are related to and how you think about them. So if you really want to work lower abs, I would go to the V series of bodyweight movements. That would be the sliding V up, the V up opposite arm, opposite leg raise, and then parallel V up is probably the next easiest thing after that, or parallel leg lifts, parallel flutter kicks, hanging bar, toes to bar, which you really should do a lot of plow stretch to prepare for that. And then eventually that would lead into aerial, which is abs, all the time. Fun questions, guys. So what you'll notice is I read the question, I rant about how they're interconnected. I go back, I read the question again, and then I isolate my answer from all the stuff I've said. So we're working on it. KD, foot question. Please explain where our feet should be loaded during the following moves. Standing and on your foot. I'm going to have to think about this question. I can tell. Top and bottom of a swing. Top and bottom squat. Club side swings. Heel, big toe, outside edge, tripod. I'm not quite sure what they mean by tripod, but I assume that that means the two outer points of the pad of the foot and the heel. It changes. It should always change. Your feet should be dynamic even when you're not moving. When you're standing, you should be standing mid-foot. Or at least I think so. But this is a question that people have been asking literally for all of history. And if you ask a boxer, they'll say something different than a kung fu guy, and that kung fu guy will say something different than a Jingyi guy, different than a powerlifting guy. So in the beginning, so standing, I say mid-foot. That's always going to be my answer. Top and bottom of the swing. At the top of the swing, mid-foot. At the bottom of the swing, heel. Top and bottom squat. I say mid-foot, but leaning back towards the heels without lifting your toes off of the ground. So I'm going to say that's 1/3 back from the heel of the foot on squat. But if you're doing something like a deck squat, you're going to roll heel to mid-foot. But if you overdo it, then your weight will go to your toes and you will push back. Club side swings, mid-foot, 100%. So it changes based on your activity. It changes based on your sport. Say the general answer for most things is mid-foot. The top of a swing, think heel for the most part in the beginning, because people tend not to straighten their legs out. So the standing in your heel cue in swings and clean and press in the beginning is there to encourage people to straighten their legs, because most people think that their legs are straight even when they are not. This is something that once again shows up when people show up to me for training, even after having done programs and everything else. They're not standing up at the top of their squats for the most part. There's a 2-degree flexion in the knee, and that's causing them to do something weird with their spine. Straight is what we're looking for, and that heel cue helps people do that. But that stand all the way up, drive your weight down through your heels, fire your quads, tuck your tailbone underneath, drive your rib cage down. But that's totally different than a ballerina who has overly straight legs, but doesn't drive their rib cage down. They lift their rib cage up. For the most part, depending on the movement. Rib cage down when standing and spinning, I think. Rib cage up when doing the arm things. Talk a lot about ballerinas, because I've trained with a lot of dancers over the years, and their coaching cues are vastly different because they're doing an entirely different thing. Doesn't mean they're not strong. Dancers are brutally strong. Probably the strongest person I ever met was about 110-pound dancer. And she told me to walk over and pick somebody up and press them over my head. And I said, man, that guy's my size. I'm not going to be able to pick him up and press him over my head and hold him and walk around with him. And she walked over, picked me up. She was maybe 110 pounds. I was 220, lifted me up to perfect lockout and walked around with me. And I was like, oh, well, now that was her structure. Her structure is better. So people who dance tend to, over time, have better structure than absolutely everybody else because they have better spinal structure than everybody else from the movement. Men, especially, stronger you are, the less you can extend for the most part overhead. There are some exceptions to that. That's why something like a kettlebell SOTS press is super impressive. And I have to build a program to do SOTS press again because I haven't done them since I ripped my leg in half. But their extension and their spinal lineup makes them stronger pound for pound than anybody else, which is a very interesting thing to realize. Not a single nerd question so far. Not one. Peter Brooks says, make chat bigger, CMD++. I'll have to look that up. If you'll put that in the comments section after this so I can actually investigate that, that would be great. I did have a bunch of computer trouble this week. Our video 4 in our heavy club series is gone. I let my computer try to upload a new operating system at the same time, and I lost data. Because I'm not a super techie computer guy. I never have. I use computers, but I'm not a computer guy. I seem to have lost some data. I did not label it properly for video number 4, and then there was something wrong with it on YouTube. So I just ended up deleting it all out, thinking that I had a backup copy, which I did not. Or if it did, I did not save it in the right file. So we're gonna reshoot video 4 in that. And if you guys have computer stuff, to put it in the comment section after this goes up so that I can see it tomorrow or the next day, because I am just getting my tuchus handed to me with computer stuff this week. Just got annihilated. I put in a new operating system and immediately like 3 things didn't work. No longer worked, and then I updated again, and then 1 thing's still not working at all. So we're a little behind. Great questions, guys. Good day from Europe. Seat set. Seat set comments a lot. Thank you so much for showing up all the way from Europe. I know it's late over there. Shock 53. Hey, Mark, do you ever think you will have a dedicated Mark Wildman studio ever again? Absolutely. What I want now is a Mark Wildman training facility, because I want to do all the stuff you can't even do in a studio. In my head, I've been planning this for my entire life. What would I have? So what I need to do is find a bunch of land where nobody can, with no houses around, where we can do all this stuff we really want to do, because we're only touching the bottom 1/10 of what I want to do. The big goal for me in the coming year is to try to get a chunk of land someplace far enough away from everybody else that the loud banging of sticks and stuff like that and fight training will not bother neighbors, because it is allowed when you get 20 people together slamming metal together or something like that. So I would like to put up a steel building, like a Viking Great Hall, essentially. I trained with this guy years ago, James Yeager, fantastic dude, now dead of, I think, ALS, just very recently. Huge loss for any coach. That guy was a genius at coaching. But he had a place in Tennessee, and he had his training room, a training facility, or like a field where they did their outdoor training. And he had what was called the team room. And I loved this concept. It was so awesome. So this is what I want to do. He had, just in the basement of his house, he had a team room, and they put up bunk beds, and they put up a bunch of couches as a common room and everything. And everybody came and stayed together in the same room. And I went for, I think, 3 weeks at one time and just stayed there for 3 weeks. And then people come in and out with the classes, but you build this amazing sense of community. I still talk to those guys. One of the guys is in Iraq in the green zone. He still calls me randomly every now and again. What's up, Mark? And I just sit there and I'll talk to him. I'll drop everything and talk to him for an hour. That's what I want. I want to have a place far enough away that we can do all the stuff we want to do, which is mace train, club train, kettlebell train in multiple different environments. That just means different places around a piece of property. I want to be able to have the team room, a steel building with grills outside, with freezers full of meat and vegetables, fresh gardens on either side. Everybody stays inside like a Viking long haul. And I want my plum, flower, steak field, Red Forest Chinese boxing. If you're watching this, this is my goal in life. My plum, flower, steak field. I have been dreaming of this since I was 10. I want it. But nobody's going to let me do that unless it's my own land. So what a plum, flower, steak field is this comes from Shaolin. The Shaolin is the young forest. And they originally cut off trees at a bunch of different heights, and then they trained over again all of their stuff stepping between these posts. And you will see this in classic kung fu movies. You will see this in Batman Begins with Christian Bale when he's training at the mountain facility with the League of Assassins, the League of Shadows. League of Assassins? I'm mixing up my bad guys in movies here. My bad guys in comic books and fiction. Yeah, the League of Assassins, League of Shadows. Somebody will tell me. But you'll see he's getting Ra's al Ghul's talking to him, and he's fighting people, and he falls down. He does that like push up between those beams. That's a plum flower stake field on top of a mountain. I want that. I want that outside of a Viking long haul. Doesn't have to be a Viking long haul. Just has to philosophically be a Viking long haul. And I want to be able to do all of my version of staff, mace, and club, and I want to be able to do it on plum flower field, not like the huge crazy ones in Shaolin that are 20 feet high, but ones that are 6 inches high, 1 foot high. So that's going to require an acre, and it's going to require a bunch of telephone posts and an auger, and we're going to auger holes. We're going to put all those in. They're going to be slightly different heights, every one, and you will learn to do all of your walking and drills over again there. Because I think that we can just recreate the coolest martial arts in all of history, experimentally, one step at a time. So will there be a Mark Wildman studio? Absolutely. It is my main goal in life. And then hopefully we can then eventually build out and get another studio in Los Angeles, and then eventually get another studio, I don't know, New York or something, and then maybe overseas. But that's the idea. It's just all one step at a time. It's just me out here doing all this stuff. So we're going to get there, but that is the dream. Mark Wildman training facility with all the cool stuff, and we'll build a castle or something. It'll be awesome. It'll be Stone Lifting 101, build castle. Looking for questions again, guys. KD, can you please talk about two-hand, one-hand swings using a heavy club? How do they compare to kettlebell swings and towel kettlebell swings? Is it a fine substitute? Can you make videos demonstrating? Yes. KD, please put this in the comments after this is up so that I can see them tomorrow in a clear format. 100%. So, club swings. There are front swings. You'll notice I don't talk about them that much because a heavy club is 45 pounds. A light kettlebell is 45 pounds. So I tend to talk about front to back swings with the equipment that does it best for the least amount of time and the least amount of learning effort. So I tend to deal with front to back swings with kettlebells. This is what separates me from other trainers, this philosophy here. And then I teach side swings with clubs. Our heavy club series, side to side swing, high to high. Definitely. You'll notice that's video 1 in clubs. And you'll notice we're on like video 37 in kettlebells, and we haven't touched it because kettlebells are fatter. They're what, 8 inches across? And a club is, that much across. 8X is even better because it's at the wide 4 inches across, I think. So you're less likely to hit yourself. Kettlebell swings in the front plane of movement just works better, faster. Towel swings are how we would mod the grip for kettlebells in that front plane of movement. You would take a towel, run it through the handle, and it would run it from your monkey grip, pulling against your grip, to your climbing grip or your club grip, where it's pulling through your hand instead of against your hand. So there is a way to do that pulling through your hand training with kettlebells. It just doesn't work great. It's harder. Tends to require more coaching, but you can coach it really early if people have good elbows and wrists. The club stuff moves in the side plane. Single hand swings with a club. I just don't care about them. I am much more interested in, let's say, side swings. Single arm side swings are something that can be very good. When people get tired, they tend to hit themselves in the shin because there's no break point in the side swing. So the side swing single arm, the way that you learn to endure it is by learning to flash your grip, which is something that people learn from doing inside circle, inside pendulum, and outside pendulum with 2 hand and 1 hand. So I changed the order. 2 hand side swing, high to high. 2 hand side swing, dead, stopping each time, low to high. two-hand side swing hang, doesn't touch the ground. Then I tend to go to inside circle, inside pendulum, outside pendulum with two hands because they force people to rotate more. Somewhere after that, we can start with single hand and run a separate learning progression. And then if I was going to put in single arm side to side swing, I would do it someplace way, way at the end of single arm. Because the benefit is not, we're trying to order these and what's the most beneficial and what thing leads naturally to the other thing in a learning cycle. Am I saying this right? So yes, can you do all of your swings with clubs? Absolutely. If you're going to do your front swings, just do it with kettlebells. It's easier, it's faster, it works better. If you're going to use clubs, put them in the planes of movement that nothing else does. Nothing else does inside circles and outside circles like clubs do. Nothing. I can find nothing that replicates the control, the balance point, and the structural alignment that does that. So use the best piece of equipment for the direction you're moving in and use the correct learning technique in order. Am I answering that right? Probably. Maybe. Okay, I can do better at that if we come back to it. What question? Coding Monkey. See, computer guy. What are the next few programs you are going to release? The next program is the Basis of Strength. Everybody already knows what's going to be in it. I've been talking about it for years. It's the big one. After that, we're going to release an Intro to Kettlebells, which is a familiarization five level program to help people who don't want to start with swings. They're not mentally prepared to start with swings, or they don't have the structure to start with swings. So I took a lot of the prep drills and I turned them into a program. It's already been shot. It's already in the queue to be edited. So what we're trying to do is order these things in order to make a system, like a university system of training for the common man, which is a weird idea to think about university for the common man. But there will eventually be like exercises for overweight individuals at the beginning to help people who are really deconditioned or who are heavier than they would like to be move forward in a positive manner, in a definable manner to get them to the next program, Intro to Kettlebells. Kettlebells are cheaper than clubs for the most part. They're more available, and we now have all the light ones, and I even just got a box from Bells of Steel. They have a 4K too. They just sent me. Awesome. So that we can compare them next to each other. And then you can start running that program to familiarize yourself with the basic movement patterns so that then people can go to the swing program, so people can go to the clean and press program, so people can go to the Turkish get up program. And then that will lead to the squat program. So we have a version of the squat program, but I think it might be too big. I think it might just be too complicated. But it's front squats and deck squats essentially. And then that leads to snatch training. And then after you've completed all that, you have a solid foundation of the basic six with one kettlebell. And then that is going to branch out and lead to a bunch of other programs. So we're going to have the Monster program, the Monster Lift program. We're going to have the Monster Lift Endurance program. We're going to have the Metcon program, which is that one's fun. I did a bunch of testing of that in the last couple of months. I've put it aside for now because the testing is, I did a ton of it. But that's like single kettlebell, not putting the weight down for 15 to 20 minutes and a manageable, learnable thing. Because I think that the way I was doing it might not be understandable to most people. So I started reworking that idea. Then we need to have the single arm club program. I shot a ton of that a long time ago. I don't even know if I can still find the footage. It's been so long and I've moved computer stuff so many times. What I'm writing right now, because I'm always writing something, is a stepping program for single arm club, which is based on mill and reverse mill, of course, but with some more complex movement in it. which takes it away from the pure basics and puts it into more advanced movement patterns that I still think are universally useful. Then I want to do like 36-week MACE programs. I have a big list, but I don't know when I'm going to get to that. Maybe we'll put one or two of those. We'll bump those up in the order. It's all about what we can get to when we can get to it. And editing takes a lot longer than I thought it was going to. It's really hard to edit, especially because my programs are psycho big. Yeah. Oh, whoa, just had a good question pop up. CT. This is a question that's way down at the bottom, so I'm jumping way out of order here, guys, but this one's really fun. What do you know about ballistic weight training and its benefits to preventing dementia? Quite a bit. People who know about my history know that I worked on a farm. I grew up on a farm that was focused on equestrian therapy for people with disabilities, both physical, mental disabilities, autism, learning problems, no arms, no legs, the whole thing. This is where my elaborate philosophy of training comes from, is you can always make a smaller step because you can always help people get better. And I'm always going back and forth between how much is the right number of steps to help the most number of people in the least amount of time, which is the engineering equation. Neurological degeneration and dementia, learning new physical skills is definitely a primary way to help prevent neurological degradation or dementia. It also helps people recover from traumatic brain injury and from stroke. So there's a trainer that one of my great friends, Tara Scott, in Los Angeles, California, and she does tons of this. And we talk about this all the time, all the time. Crossing the center line of the body, vastly important. And then learning new complex physical skills. Everything I do is designed to do this. I don't know if anybody's noticed. I'm sure a bunch of people on the Discord and everything else have, is that tons of my programs are designed to do neurotherapy on accident and to help people continue to learn physical skills for long periods of time. The majority of people who live in the modern world just stop learning physical skills sometime after high school. And then the process of degradation begins nearly immediately. How many 27-year-olds do you know who are so hopelessly annihilated physically that you don't know if they could ever recover? Almost everybody who went to law school, ironically. I know tons of people who went to law school, and by the time they got through with law school, they had degenerated so much physically from the lack of activity, the lack of sleep, the huge amounts of pressure and everything else, that it's like they're operating at the level of like a 60 or 70-year-old. We have to teach people how to learn. So that's why my programs are not based on aesthetic attributes. Aesthetic attributes of doing bench press is not going to prevent dementia because it's the exact same movement all the time. Movements need to change. This is what the brain and the body want to do. Humans are meant to run through the forest, chasing elk, planning their route, looking and tracking a moving animal over unlevel ground and changing terrain and predicting where that animal would go and where you could take your optimum shot so you can eat dinner. Your brain is a supercomputer, and it has to be treated like it has to be given problems to solve in order for it to continue to operate. If you don't use it, you lose it. If you're not going to use it, it's going to rust. Is that Highlander? That might be Highlander. So all the programs I have teach some specific physical thing. And we start with the basics, the 6 basics of kettlebelling, the swing, the clean and press, right? The Turkish get up, which is a 5-level program, which is tons of breakdowns, right? the squat programs, right? Just learning all these little things and then giving your brain a mathematical opportunity to get really good at them is very, very important. The intro to kettlebell program is increasing complexity and done in a way to help people learn how to get better at kettlebells. If they get better at kettlebells, then they are likely to want to continue, and then we can add complexity to kettlebells forever. Clubs do something super unique. They swing laterally. So when people have neurodegeneration or traumatic brain injury or something like that, crossing the center line of your body is something that is in cognitive brain therapy. My friend is a brain gym trainer. They talk about this all the time. Clubs do it on accident. What are the three most important things in heavy club swinging, according to me, not according to anybody else? Other people will tell you the front swing. I tell you not to bother because you do it with kettlebells. It is inside circle, crossing the center line, outside circle, crossing the center line, shield cast, crossing the center line, pendulum, crossing the center line, outside pendulum, crossing the center line, alternating circles, crossing the center line, alternating pendulums, crossing the center line, 180 gamma cast, crossing the center line, mill, crossing the center line twice, reverse mill, crossing the center line twice. Kettlebells and clubs in relation to dementia, there could not be a stronger case. I don't think you could write a better system. The better system is combining it with mace. Kettlebells, clubs, and mace. Heavy weights, focus on your basic, intermediate weight, intermediate complexity, focus all the movements on crossing the center line. And I'm not going to do that last one. Mace, infinite complexity forever, crossing the center line. What do we know about that in training? We know a lot. We know that crossing the center line and adding weight causes people to align their structure, breathing, and movement, and it changes the way people's brain works. If you got hit in the head or you had a stroke or something like that, then club training is exactly what you would learn to realign your body, your structure, and your mind. And then eventually you would go to mace to have an infinite level of complexity so that you can learn forever, because that's what the brain wants to do. I think I answered that fairly well. I answer long answers. When will the next round of Wildman Athletica clubs be out? They should be out soon. They should be rolling off the line right now. Don told me the other day that they had a whole nother batch ready to come. Let's go back up here. I haven't seen a single nerd question. Not a nerd question today. Thank you from the bottom 1%. Boom, right? I'm not a natural athlete. I write all my programs for me and for people who have trouble learning. And I try to guarantee a learning progression. If you did the program, it's impossible not to learn. That's what I'm always shooting for with every program I write. Every program forever should have a neurological component. Overweight program question. Is there other modality that can aid overweight program? I'm trying to get my mom into it, but she says 12 kilogram kettlebell is too heavy for her and her knees worn out. Absolutely. Your mom should not be using a 12 kilogram kettlebell. No way. 4 kilograms, 6 kilograms, add a weight to it, 5 kilograms. You need to be doing your circles, your 8X, make it light. Inside circle, outside circle, shield cast. 12K is way too heavy for people who are overweight or deconditioned. That is why we are looking for the equipment to round out the idea. And people are starting to make that equipment now, probably because I hassle literally every manufacturer that I know about this stuff all the time. So the idea is with overweight individuals, we want to get people 4K, 5K, 6K, 7K, and then with the new, back here, the adjustable kettlebell, the bottom printed half, 8K, 8.5K, 9K, 9.5K, 10K. So people could run something like the overweight individuals idea, which is still being formalized into a program, the intro to kettlebell idea, and so people have something that they can work on that's doable. If it's not doable, people will not do it. If it's too heavy, they're going to get discouraged. They're going to get hurt. They are not going to want to continue, and we are going to destroy their mind, which is going to destroy everything else. We cannot do that. The goal is to give people attainable goals by making sure that I am looking for all the best equipment, and then I'm going out and testing it with people to make sure that these ideas work so that we can help everybody. There are, 100 million people in America that are severely deconditioned. 100 million. We can help all those people. That's the goal. The goal is to get those 100 million people back up, right? And then there's like, how many are there super healthy people in the world? It's not high because movement education is not prioritized in the modern world. It should be. Every kid should be learning mace and club and kung fu and jujitsu, every one of them. And then we would solve 90% of the problems of the modern world. Question, grip strength, J. Smith Hill. Guys, I'm jumping around now. I lost my spot. I'm sorry. Grip strength. I recently started the Nerd Math Swing program and am having grip issues on high rep workouts. Can you recommend any supplemental grip work during the less intense swing weeks? I don't. The question, J. Smith Hill, is what weights are you using? You should probably get more access to weights. There are a bunch of grip things you can do. You've got Captains of Crush. One of my favorite things that I used to do was towel cable pulls. But for the most part, if your grip will get tired when you're doing any of these programs, that's because every program pushes you harder than the previous workout, right? It varies in the clean and press and swing programs because it's supposed to, because it's a wave. So that there are hard times and it should be pushing your body. Your grip is probably the weakest part of your body. It is for almost everybody in the modern world, unless you're like a carpenter or a farrier or an iron worker. Most people simply do not use their grip in the modern world on a day-to-day basis anymore. We don't farmers carry, we don't carry groceries back from the grocery store for the most part. Farmers carry classic, one thing in each hand, carry it 400 yards out of the field, bushels of apples, all that other stuff. Your grip will get taxed, right? I mean, my hands used to just ache so bad after certain workouts, and that's fine. That's your body learning that it needs to make your hand stronger. You can do supplemental stuff. Towel cable pull downs is something, but I just don't talk about it that much because it would require people to go to a gym. So I tell people that's why we built the waves into these programs so that it gets hard and your hands really hurt, and then it gets easy. And then your hands have time to recover, but not stop working. One of the key things we're trying to get people to do is to not stop working. Ramp up, start over, ramp up, start over, ramp up, start over. And that cycle is there specifically to help people's hands. The more weights you have access to, the better it's going to go. When I first started kettlebelling, you did have access to weights. You had the 16, the 24, and the 32. And I just shredded my hands all the time. You would train so hard, the skin would fall off of your hands. I still have scars and stuff. Here, you would cut big old quarter-sized gashes out of your hand where you just rip off. The more weights you have, the less likely that is to happen. But your hands will hurt, especially when you're doing something like club training. Club training is very, very hard on the grip in the beginning for most people. If you start to flex your elbow, then you need to stop because you're going to end up hurting your arm. If you can no longer maintain straight arm and grip at the same time, then you need to stop. Otherwise, you need to get stronger hands, which is an annoying answer. I know, it's not a fun answer. Nobody likes to be uncomfortable. But humans are designed to not like discomfort. But discomfort is that last set where your hands really hurt, is probably where you're going to get the adaptation later. There's a fine line of self coaching where you have to figure out what is the line between discomfort and injury. That is the point of a lot of these programs as well, to allow people to learn to cycle and to learn the movement patterns so that they can become more effective self coaches. Because people, when they start out, are absolutely terrible self coaches, god awful. Everybody thinks, all guys almost always think they're more hardcore than they are. And ladies almost think that they're not as hardcore as they are. So the programs are designed in a way to make ladies acknowledge the strength that they have, and it tries to bring men more into a realistic alignment with what they think that they can do. Because everybody's a little bit off. So learning to self-coach is an art. It's also, we talk about it a lot on this channel. Will you go into acro staff in future seminars? Seed set. I'm not going to teach dragon staff, guys. I'm going to leave that to the fire dancers. Acro staff, are you talking about like fire spinning staff and stuff like that? I'm not going to teach it. There's plenty of other coaches who coach that very well. I don't see the need for me to teach it in the limited period of time that I have. I'm teaching the part that nobody else is teaching, so I'm just going to stick to the thing that I'm doing. If that's what acro staff is. If acro staff is something else, if you're talking about like monkey staff or something, I'm not going to teach monkey staff. I have a friend who can teach monkey staff, but I'm not going to teach monkey staff. I'm focusing on that bottom 90%, guys. Bottom 90%. KD, video reminder. Make a video of timed follow along video for your neck mobility. Somebody remind me to do that tomorrow. Fun. Imagine an untrained individual. Train him with single arm shield cast only. After 10 years, he reaches his peak with a full volume cycle at, let's say, 70 pounds. What would his physique look like? Well, he'd probably have a really hard time straightening out his arms. The point of putting inside circles and outside circles in there is that they traction the elbow and the shoulder. If you just did single arm shield cast, you would end up in this position all the time, and that would not be great for you. That's the point of combining kettlebells and clubs together, is that they pull the body in opposite directions of the other one so that they naturally balance themselves out. If you do just one lift, just single arm shield cast forever, it would be okay, but the odds that your elbow is going to do great without traction are not good. Granted, his arms will be huge. Seed set, mace question info. There's a mace being released by Eric's Fitness that's basically an adjustable kettlebell globe with a long shaft. What are your thoughts on this design? I think it's a fun design. I've seen the same thing. Yeah, it's basically taking an adjustable kettlebell. They chop off the handle and they weld a handle on it. And it's going to be a mace that goes up into the, depending on the weight of the handle, probably 70 to 75 pound range. I don't know. This is something that people used to do before maces became really available. People were taking competition kettlebells, chopping the handles off, and welding handles on them in order to make gattas. Long handle, big heavy weights on the end, and working on the most important move in mace, 360s or 10 to 2s. So this is going to be cool. Are you going to be able to do fancy club swinging or fancy mace swinging with it? Almost guaranteed not, because of the size of the globe. You won't be able to get into this position. So I think it'll run really well for things like 360s and 10 to 2s, and the weight will be awesomely high so people can get super strong. I'm always trying to get up people towards that weight of the 80-pound mark, and that's from history. The Great Gamma, a wrestler, was famous for having an 80-pound club, a gata. It's kind of a super sexy gata with like a big handle on it, like 2-inch handle, something bigger than that handle on it, and doing 1,000 360s a day, every day. So we'll all be able to get closer to that ideal because the equipment will finally exist, right? I'm still trying to get those add-on kits from 8X for the exact same reason. The thing about the 8X is that it's thinner, so I think it will pass past the body easier. I don't know with the size of the globe and the length of the handle if people are going to be clocking themselves in the back of the leg with it. I don't know. Don't do that. I've done that. It's not fun. I thought I broke my leg once doing that with a big ass gata. It had just a huge head on it. And I'm used to swinging straight down in the back because I started with, clubs, and they're very cylindrical. They're designed to hit that range of movement. I don't know. I'm going to have to get my hands on one and try. I think the design is awesome and sound because you're going to get the same thing as this. You're going to get 19 weights for the cost of one mace, and you're going to be able to go up for a lifetime. And then the goal will be to get up to using that thing full weight for 10 minutes nonstop. So the goal is already set. The second I saw it, I was like, we know exactly what we're going to do with that. The program will be a volume cycle for the most part, unless you've already done a ton of training, because the light version of that is going to be what, in the almost 30-pound range, because that shell is 12K. 12K is 26 pounds. So chop off the handles, add a handle. Maybe it's 27 and a half to start, which is already really heavy for most people to do 360s with. So I think that there's a ton of potential for the idea. And I think that you'll easily be able to give that to bodybuilders and power lifters, guys who do a lot of barbell training, and it will be big and it will be heavy and it will add the one thing that they desperately need, which is that upper body rotation casting pattern. So you could take a power lifter who does deadlift, back squat, and bench press and throw that in there and create monsters. I think that it's a great idea. I'm super excited about it. The potential is huge, huge for a piece of equipment like that. Can't flash your grip without a pommel. CT, this is a comment. Not with a seriously heavy club anyway. Learned that from breaking the plastic pommel on my TacFit 25. Yeah. You just have to have a lot of training to be able to flash your grip without a pommel. So most people don't do it. So there's a reason you can flash your grip on a mace, but they tend to be much lighter. But yeah, pommels are pretty key to maces and clubs. Especially if you're going to flash your grip. Flashing your grip means that at a certain point of the movement, you would open your hand and reclose it in an effort to cycle, change grip, and get more endurance by getting a brief second of relaxation in your grip. Nerd question. What's your favorite fantasy scenario setting? What's your favorite fantasy scenario setting? I mean, I don't think you can have a favorite because they're all so vastly different. I think everybody wishes that they could have lived in Lord of the Rings in Middle Earth until they got eaten by goblins or orcs. Dragonlance was always awesome. A world where you have flying dragons that with knights on top of them seems like a great idea. Not sure how the physics on that work out or how much those dragons are going to eat. It seems like a massive engineering equation that I just don't understand how it could be solved. I think that the most interesting fantasy scenario is the modern apocalypse scenario because it's the one that I think people can most likely understand. There is a book by S.M. Sterling, and he wrote a book called Dies the Fire. And he originally wrote, I believe, in the 90s. And it's about the modern world, and one day the power just goes off all over the world, everywhere. And firearms no longer work, and internal combustion engines no longer work. Something has changed the physics of the universe to return humans essentially to a much more primitive era. So gasoline will still burn, it just doesn't ignite an engine anymore. Black powder will still burn, or gunpowder will still burn, but it doesn't ignite a bullet anymore. So it returns all humans back to a level playing field. I never finished it. I mean, the books were coming out every several years. The first three books was about the immediate aftermath of the power going out and people breaking off and forming into tribes, as they probably would. And the people who had skills teamed up together and essentially created clans. And then those clans vied for power for the next several years until the world came back to a stable level. It kind of back at a medieval time frame, very Arthurian in idea. I think that that's a fascinating idea. They tried to copy it. NBC tried to copy it for a TV show. What was that called? They tried to copy it where the power goes out one day. They had a giant promo for it at Comic-Con. I think it lasted about one season because NBC absolutely did not understand the fundamental crux of the idea, was that 20 years after the power goes out, people will not still have brand new t-shirts and their backpacks will have stuff in them. So visually, it just did not work out, and nobody worked with the movement coordinators very well. It's not like C. Did anybody watch C with Momoa? Fascinating. God, Momoa is a beast of a man. What a monster. Terrifying in real life, man. That guy is just the guy. The guy is a real athlete, right? He's a real natural athlete, and then he stacked on tons of training on top of it. C is not a universe you would want to live in because everybody in that universe goes blind. But as far as a conceptual idea of how the world remakes itself and how movement in human society changes, I think is very, very interesting. And Momoa, you have to watch Momoa move in that. He is a monster. And the martial arts that they create in that is absolutely fascinating. Fascinating. For anybody who's ever done blindfolded martial arts work, it's incredible. I don't think people do this anymore. I realized I had like a really weird martial arts education. When I was young, I trained in this little shitty town with a guy, and he taught me a very weird version of traditional jujitsu. But there was blindfolded training in it where you learn to do movements by touch and feel. And I still do it, all that stuff that was trained into me, I do it when I'm in a dark room. Immediately I do it when I'm in a dark room, and the way that I navigate dark spaces is all based on this thing that I learned as a kid. And when I saw C and I saw Momoa do so much of that stuff, I was like, oh, Momoa, so good, so good. What other cool fantasy worlds are there? Of course, Cyberpunk is super fun. Cyberpunk is super fun, but of course it's dystopian hellscape at the same time. Think of Cyberpunk as dystopian hellscape where everybody gets cool clothes. I really appreciate that as a genre, as an idea, and as a design aesthetic. I had a lot of friends who worked and made clothes like that for real and kind of did that for real. But yeah, I don't know. What's your favorite fantasy world? No clue. No clue. They're all interesting in some way. Some are more interesting than others, but let's lean me towards swords and sorcery. Coon Hard T100. Coon Hard T100. Question: when doing two-hand club inside circles, my base hand, top hand, gets pretty tweaked at the end of the movement. Am I doing something wrong? I think I may not have enough mobility. Any recommendations? Yeah, so a lot of people will try to catch with a bent wrist. They will not have their wrist flat in line with their body, and it will compromise everything in their grip. And when they decelerate the weight, it compresses their wrist. Learn how to not do that. I know it's a super annoying answer. Drop weight. If you're hurting yourself on something like inside circle or outside circle on the catches, and it keeps happening, you're stressing some type of tendon or ligament. So you either need to drop weight and repeat a cycle, let your tendons and ligaments straighten back up, and see if you can straighten your wrist back out. Most people don't know that they're doing it. They don't know that they're twisting their wrist or they're cranking to create these weird angles in their joints. So, or we jump to single hand or we jump to two hand. Whichever one they're not good at, we jump to the other program and we allow them to go back down in weight and relearn another time. Once again, natural learning technique. We're trying to trick people by having them repeat ideas until their body chooses the most efficient path. Some people just actually need to be physically told. This is something that I've noticed when doing the club, mace, and staff seminars is people think that their wrist is straight and their wrist is not straight. Their wrist needs to be flat and they don't notice that they're doing this or that they're doing this, that they are craning their wrist. If you learn to punch bare knuckle, it tends to solve the problem. So when you punch bare knuckle, you punch with the first two knuckles without hand wraps or anything. You learn to punch. If your wrist is flexed, you'll notice the wrong part of your hand will hit and it will not feel good. So this starts slow and light and you hit things that don't move until you can learn to line up your wrist. And then the club should be the same movement pattern as that. And how you learn that, oftentimes when I was taught obviously with no clubs. And then I realized that clubs were the same thing. When I coach people, I coach the clubs first and then do the empty stuff later, if anybody ever gets to it. Almost nobody ever gets to it. But yes, the odds are that your wrist is in the wrong spot, and oftentimes that will be indicated by your top knuckle. If your top knuckle is not in line with your other knuckles, then you're probably doing something weird to your wrist. When I teach Mace Club staff seminars, I walk around and I just point at people's knuckle and I can see it from across the room and I say, your wrist is not in line. And people have to go through a process of acknowledging that it's not right and then correcting it and then reprogramming their brain to get back to a better alignment. Guys, you got to label these things as questions sometimes. Here we go. Sai Chu. Stretching question. Tricep stretches seem to either stretch my nerves or just compress my shoulder. What to do? You got to tell me what stretch you're doing if you want a better answer to that question. Tricep stretches, like our shoulder stretches, tricep stretches would be full flexion in order to lengthen the tricep. You got to tell me what you're doing. I would just say answer without having any more information. It would be puppy dog stretch on a box. Here's going to be a fun one. Gigi, Krav question. Is it realistic, practical to self-coach Krav Maga with online resources in your opinion? Not unless you have a very willing training partner. Self-coaching something like Krav or Kung Fu or Jiu Jitsu is extraordinarily hard without physical biofeedback. That means working with another person. How does their body align? How hard do you hit? How do you line your body up? How do you step to get closest to the target? People who self-coach martial arts usually have a vast amount of person-to-person interpersonal training at the beginning of their training. So this is often how Kung Fu used to be taught. You had a big Kung Fu class and people practiced all the moves with each other, all the grips, all the throws, all the strikes, and then they ghosted those movements later and turned them into forms which people could practice on their own because they already understood the intent in the alignment of each individual movement. Just doing kung fu forms, as it is often taught now, and thinking that you're just going to do the throw is complete fiction. You you can self-coach some things, right? You can self-coach punching technique, right? You could self-coach wooden dummy. You could self-coach heavy bag. You can hit harder. You can learn to line up without hurting your wrist. You can learn to hit without hurting your wrist. Does that translate directly to training with another person? Absolutely not. There's a massive gap in experimental data there. If you went to, say, a Krav place and you trained 2 hours a week, you could self-coach the rest of the time. If you had whatever information you get, you can then use to self-coach yourself. But there's a lot of stuff. The whole point of training in groups is that people are not aware of what they are doing wrong for the most part. Some people are aware. It's a very small percentage of the population, though. So can you self-coach from just online tutorials? Maybe. I think online tutorials allow you to organize your information in such a way that you can choose what you want to work on when. And they will allow you to refine your understanding, but there has to be experimental technique, experimental learning in order for you to understand the core concepts. Can you self-coach? Maybe. Would it really help to have a very good partner? Yes. This is a classic idea in Japanese martial arts. The uke, the guy who gets thrown. In order for you to become good at a martial art, somebody has to get thrown. And if you want to be the best martial artist, you become the uke because you understand what it's like to be thrown, so that then you can analyze all the joint angles and everything through experimentation in order to understand the techniques. Sai Chu, question. Puppy dog stretch stretches the nerve on my left arm and shoulder impingement on my right arm. I still don't have enough information to tell you what's wrong with your lineup. Is the overhead tricep stretch. The overhead tricep stretch. I don't think the overhead tricep stretch has much benefit at all. I think if you do a shield cast, you're in a tricep overhead stretch. Is it your tricep or is it your thoracic spine that is not moving properly? That's the question that I would ask. Is your spine extending while your shoulder is trying to move? That's a question. I can't answer that question without seeing somebody move. Question. Coonhard T100. Want to pick up a Mark Wildman 8X club, but only have the funds for either a club or arc. Which do you recommend to buy first? I would buy the club first. This answer changes every week. Somebody asks me this question every week. Club, it's really hard to hit yourself in the toes. With arc, if you're new and your grip slides, you could crush your toes. The arc could also easily double as your intro to Mace 360 training. The question is, what is more valuable to you? Not crushing your toes or adding a longer lever to your 360 training. This week, I'm going to say club because I think people are probably going to crush their toes if they're not new, if they're not familiar with club swinging on the inside circle, outside circle. We have a spam bot. Great. Have I made it? Does that mean I've made it? Peter Osborne, good sci-fi recommendation after your comment on fantasy. Okay. Kim Stanley Robinson's Ministry for the Future. Okay. I'll look that up. Best Western I've read in a long time. Robert McLean's Pity the Beast. All right. That's good, both good recommendations. I'm going to throw back. Now you've made me think about some other stuff. The Adventures of the Stainless Steel Rat. Probably one of the most memorable openings, but I think I probably read it at a very instrumental time in my life. The Adventures of the Stainless Steel Rat is about a future criminal, and this is This was written like in the 50s and the 60s. So it's really kind of like got that 60s vibe to it. And all the computers are not digital. They are all on punch cards because that was the technology. That was the height of technology at the time that these books were written. And the Adventures of the Stainless Steel Rat are like a fantastic thing, especially to read now, where we know technology has gone versus what they think technology would have been in the future is a fantastic read. They are 60s books, so be aware of that. And they're fun. Also, what was Doc Savage, who originally started in like the 20s or the 30s with like, essentially pulp fiction. And Doc Savage was always like a very weird and interesting fantasy type world as well. I haven't read it in 20 years. I might be bonkers. But that was like, once again, it's really interesting to read science fiction or fantasy from different time periods and what they thought that the future would be like and what they thought society would be like, because it's nothing like that. Super fascinating. The Adventures of the Stainless Steel Rat I loved that book. Of course, you have Harry Harrison and the Intergalactic Superhero. Yeah. Written during the 60s and the 70s, massively subversive. But of course, if you want to talk about sci-fi being some of the most influential things of all time, Stranger in a Strange Land, responsible for the 1960s movement. And it drove the author nuts forever. One of the other most influential books in all of sci-fi fantasy is Starship Troopers. Starship Troopers is still an incredible, incredible read. That is the origin of the idea of the mech suit. Steve Blackshaw, are stomach vacuums functional or just aesthetic? Depends on who you ask. I don't care much about stomach vacuums. That's very big in certain types of yoga. I don't practice it. I'm not super interested in the idea of stomach vacuums. I really don't have any thoughts on stomach vacuums. People do it. It's cool. Belly dancers do it. I know a lot of belly dancers who practice stomach vacuums and isolations of core. I don't know. It's supposed to make your digestion work better if you do it in the yogic sense. Belly dancers do it as part of their act or routine as stomach isolation and stomach waves and all this other stuff. But I've never seen somebody do aerial and stomach vacuum. I've seen them brace. I only talk about the things that I find the most useful, and I leave those other ideas to other people. Is every other day too much for slam ball on my third workout of level 1 now? You might find that to be a little much. You might find you need more recovery. If you're just doing slam ball, then you can do it 3 times a week. If you're Tetrising it, should probably be twice a week. Slam ball gets super hard, super fast for almost everybody. It requires a massive range of movement in the squat, and the squat technique is very hard for most people to acquire. And it's no joke on core. There's no way out. That's the point of slam ball. Squat technique, no way out. And the time frame for that program is 60 seconds on, 60 seconds off. So when you're doing your squats, you're going to get up into the 23 to 25 reps with a medium weight, which is fast and hard. And then if you're cheating your squats, it doesn't matter. The next level will annihilate you. Rock bottom pickups, squat down to the bottom, pick up the slam ball in the bottom position, stand up, will annihilate you, because if you try to have bad squat technique, it won't work. You will have to drop your hips and get down into your rock bottom squat. Just rock bottom, load, unload is brutal for most people. Rock bottom, load, extend the spine, drop down. It's all the natural lifting technique, so it can be really hard on people because most people do not have those lifting techniques. That's why I wrote it, natural lifting technique. I just used that technique the other day. I had a case outside full of clubs, still from a movie from 2019. It had 150 pounds of clubs in it, and it's a 5'11" hard case. You get it, pick it up, right? You can't pick it up by the handle. and carry it super well. So rock bottom, get down, pick up one side, hug squat, stand up, tip it up to your shoulder and walk it out from where it was and bring it back up here so I can put it back in storage. I was like, oh yeah, it's exactly slam ball technique. Oh yeah, this is exactly why I wrote that program, is for this exact reason. I opened up the case. I was like, man, this thing is freaking heavy. And I opened it up and added up the weight and I was like, that's why. It's a really heavy case. Yeah. Slam ball technique can be hard on most people. You should Tetris it with something else. Otherwise, it's brutal, right? So you would do like level 1, level 1, level 1, level 2, level 1, level 2, level 1, level 2, level 1, level 3. And you need to start bouncing those things around. Slam ball is hard on most people because of the range of movement required and the core contraction required. There is no way out of that program. Peter Osborne, do you train with your dog? No, they're not smart enough to stay out of the way of swinging objects. They want to be involved. Any thoughts on how to bring your best friend into your fitness line? Take him for a run. Go chase deer. You want to get your dog involved in your fitness? I used to run when I first lived in Ohio when I was a teenager, and we would run every day. Me and my dogs would run every day. Forest run every day. Around the field, through the farm, through the woods, off trail. You and your dog will love off-trail running. And then if we saw a deer, he would go one way, I'd go the other way. Never got one, but he certainly got a mouthful of them a couple of times. Abs on those squats is real. Yes, the slam ball program, there's no way out. Do you incorporate breath work into your routine? If so, what kinds? Wim Hof, Tumo, pranayama, etc. I used to have a bunch of practitioners of breath of fire. I knew a lot of circus performers who did breath of fire. I would do breath of fire with them sometimes, but for the most part, my breath work is my club swinging or my mace swinging. Oftentimes when I warm up, I will do only nasal breathing, lighter weight, 6 to 10 minutes, close your mouth, focus on your movement patterns, and only nasal breathe. And that's just because I'm lazy. I don't sit down and do extra breath work if I don't have to. I haven't in a long time, not since I left the studio, the martial arts studio that I did in Los Angeles. My master died, studio closed. So I haven't really done it since then. I do my breath work as part of my movement work now. Could I benefit from seated breath work? I'm sure I could. I definitely, absolutely positive that I could, but I just don't do a lot of it. I do have some friends who do seated meditation. I just do mace while they do seated meditation. I think Wim Hof has very good benefit. There's a lot of good stuff and science behind Wim Hof breathing. And you'll notice that it's very similar to Taoist breathing and other types of breathing. Taoist breathing, am I saying that right? Somebody will tell me if I'm wrong. All right, guys, we've been going for way too long here. This is 2 hours and 8 minutes in. Let's maybe do one or two more here. Leading man, leading ladies. How important is weight distribution for club bells? I got the Heroic Sport plate-loaded adjustable club bell, and I'm concerned that I might be more top-heavy compared to milled clubs. Weight distribution is important. The further away from your hand the weight is, the harder it is. So the balance point on original clubs that I used to use was about 4 inches back from the tip. But you'll notice bulvas, I'm saying that wrong. I always say it wrong. Like a mace with a globe that's short, that's like club length, are really far out, distribution far out. For the most part, whatever you're using, just keep training with it and stick with one type of equipment for now. If you jump balance points and types of equipment a lot in the beginning, it can just be very confusing for most people and the math gets hard to track. So that's why you track your math according to implement, a 25-pound club from this manufacturer, because it might not be the same as the balance point for a 25-pound club from another manufacturer. That's something that I'm putting in the app. is the weight plus the manufacturer, because those should really be different graphs, because manufacturing varies greatly. Balance point is important, but if you start with a light enough weight, it's not too bad. The longer the lever, the further the weight is away from your hand, the more torque, torsion, and traction you get. But there is kind of a medium ground, right? People tend not to start with mace because the weight is really far out and the lever is really long. Usually the best compromise is clubs, like milled clubs, I think, for the most part, or 8X clubs, even though their center of mass changes quite a bit, because they're the most predictable. Yeah, I think that's an accurate way to say that. GTO Otto Estorga. Let's do this as the last question, guys. When doing multiple sessions consecutively, swings, clean and press or other, which warm up takes precedence? The warm up for the most complex movement takes precedence. So if you're doing swings, it's just hip snap. If you're doing clean and press, it's hip snap plus shoulder extension. Do the warm up for the more complex activity. For the most part, it's just a straight general answer. But you can hybridize your warm ups. I used to do that a lot when training with stunt guys. I would always show up really early because you never knew what you were going to get into. And I would do a whole kettlebell warm up. I would do like 12 minutes without putting the weight down just to get the blood flowing because I trained super early. And then do 8 minutes of my individual specific spinal warm up because I knew you were going to get thrown. And then I would do their 30-minute warm up, which was much more precise and specific to sport and activity specific training. So as a general rule, do the more complex movement pattern warm up. If you know it's going to get crazy, do the more complex movement pattern warm up plus whatever you think you need to work on. Okay, guys. Wow, we really went over today. 2 hours and 12 minutes. That is a lot. Great questions today, guys. I tried a new method of trying to display questions so I could try to keep track of it better. It did not work. I'm going to go back to the drawing board and see if I can't get this better. If you didn't get your question answered, ask it again or get on the Discord and put it on the giant list of questions. You'll notice KD asked a ton of questions today that individual brought from the Discord. I don't know if KD is male or female. Sorry, guys. Or whatever. KD is not very descriptive. But we asked a lot of questions there from the Discord. So they were labeled very clearly. Club question, kettlebell question. That's good. That helps us understand. That helps me understand faster what I'm dealing with so you get a better, faster, clearer answer. If you don't label it question, I have to read through a bunch of comments. If you're going to put in comments, please put comments in front of them so that I can distinguish quickly without having long lags in the time frame here. Don't forget to like the stream. Yeah, I don't know. Like the stream, guys. All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Bring questions next time. Get on the Discord. Continue to discuss things with everybody. We all learn together. We all get better.